Hello everyone, I am Kiran Prakash Panwar and today we are going to read about the domain 2 which is asset security. So I would like to give my brief introduction here. So my name is Kiran Panwar. I am CISSP, CISA and ISO 27001 certified. I am working as a solution delivery advisor in one of the big four and I'm the member of Breaking Barrier Women in Cybersecurity. So today's agenda of the class of is identify and classify the asset, define the sensitive data, defining data and asset classification, determine data security controls, understand data states, handling information security and asset and data protection methods. So next, firstly, we need to understand about the what is the meaning of the asset security first and what is the principle of that asset security as well. So firstly we need to understand why we require the asset security. So asset security, the agenda and the objective of the asset security domain is to contain the concept, principle, structure, standard and used to monitor the security assets. So those controls used to enforce various level of CIA triads. So the domain objective is mostly on the basis of like classify the information, determine, maintain the ownership, protect privacy, ensure the appropriate retention, determine data security controls and handling requirement. So next one is the DAD triad, which say disclosure, alteration and denial. On the other basis, we can say it confidentiality, availability, and integrity. So confidentiality when is like the prevent unauthorized disclosure, as everybody knows about it. Integrity when no unauthorized modification consists in the data and protected data resource being altered in the unauthorized fashion. And availability, that data has to be available when our customer or the vendor or everybody, when it required, it should be available. So the complement of the CIA is again like the data should not be disclosed, that should not be altered, or that should be always available, and that should not be in the denial and whenever our customer or anybody wants. So the benefits of effective managed IT asset in the organization is asset visibility and control, improve asset visual utilization, audit requirement compliance, regulatory requirement compliance, reduce cost of software and hardware, support of changes and projects of organization, alignment of asset costs to services, give configuration data for service management and data source for accurate decisions. Next is there are 5 effectively steps for the data classification. We need to understand the 5 basic steps to classify the data, and that has to be very relevant effect for the our organization. So why we need the information classification, I would like to elaborate it first. So some data is valuable to the people who take strategic decision. Some data loss could create a significant problem to the enterprises. Information classification enhance CIA. It focus on the proper implementation of control depending upon the sensitivity of information, standardized type of information and protection requirement, and it helps to achieve efficient cost benefit ratio. So there are 5 steps which includes um, identification, discover, classify, secure, and monitor. So identify the sensitive and high value. We need to classify our data and asset on the priority as the high, medium, and low. We need to discover the location and accessibility of the sensitive data, where is going, who is going to access it, or where it will be located. Classification according to the value of the organization. Yes, in the military sector, there are 4 to 5 types of classification, as I have mentioned in the slide. In the private sector, there are again 6 or 5 types of classification level. Now we need to secure our data, that is employee security controls and the protection. We need to monitor it 24/7 because data is very important for the organization. Next is information classification, how we need to classify what things need to be understand and what things to be very we need to analyze before we do the information classification. There first is condition that has the four uh, containment, that is again the value, what is the value of the data, what is the age of the data, what is the useful life, and what is the association. Second one is elements, that is authorization, custody, reproduction, logging, labeling, filing. Next is limitation, that is ability of expert, ethics of custodian, and compatible activities. Next one is procedures, that is specific control procedure we require to save the data or specify the criteria for the labeling. Is it confidential? Is it private? It is public? It is secret? Whatever classification one we want. Next is data lifecycle management. We need to save the data, we need to monitor, we need to classify entire the day at this stage, each and every stage of the data life cycle. We need to put this specific administration, physical and logical control to save our data and to save our assets. So we start from the collection. Whenever we collect the data, we need to understand about, we should be very particular about the collection of the data. The data source has to be very specific, that should not be altered. The integrity, confidentiality has to be very strictly maintained. Define the data classification level, specify the criteria that will be determined how the data will be classified. Identify data owners, that is again very important steps. I will tell you why it is important in the next slide. Identify data custodian, indicate the security control or protection mechanism for at each and every level. Document any exception if you bypass any steps, or if you give access to the data, like if we are out of the security control, we are giving the access to giving access to the another person, or non-authority kind of person we give the access. So indicate the method that can be used to transfer the custody or the of the information to a different data owners. Create a procedure to periodically review the classification and ownership. Indicate procedure for declassifying the data, and integrate the issue into the security awareness programs to all the employees to understand how we need to handle the data, what type of measures we should be apply, what kind of precaution we should follow when we are handling the data. So next is the data ownership and data custodian. So data ownership is top level and primary responsibility for the data, who define the level of the classification, who define the control for the level of the classification, who define baseline security standards, who do impact analysis and decide when to destroy information. Next is data custodian. It grants the permission on a daily basis to the data. It ensures the compliance with the data policy and the data ownership guidelines. Ensure the accessibility, maintain and monitor security, data archive, data documentation, and take regular backups, restore of the data and restore to check the validation. He ensures the CIA conduct the user authorization, implement security controls on the data. Next is data protection. We need to implement multiple types of control on the data protection, like log the files on the metadata, internal protocol. We need internet protocol to save suffering or do not download the files kind of controls. We need to put the email policies. We need to put strong password policies, password criteria, password characteristics, and everything. We need to put strong remote access control. We need to put controls on the mobile devices and the storage devices, like encryption, access, or monitoring their uh, types of as per the types of the storage devices. We need to put the controls. Protocol for the employees leaving. We need to put exit procedure we have in the organization, and we need to follow that very seriously. um, we should be very careful, like when the person is leaving the organization, he or she should hand over in the entire data, and and the assets. Without it, they cannot leave the organization. So visitor contractor protocol, like and there has to be SCOT policy or the third party security management while the vendor is coming, or the like maintenance person is coming. So sometime we need to have access control, physical access control policy over there. Next is security audit. Yearly, we need to perform security audit, information security audit, to uh, to monitor that all the security control are being complied by the teams. Next is office computer and servers. Yes, we need to prove the use policies, acceptable use policies. The privilege uses, we need to know. Control access has to be there. Control access has to be defined. Roles and duties has to be defined. Reviews has to be done, and that has to be performed. The report has to be performed in front of the governance on the timely basis. Next is viable controls. Managing the sensitive data. Yes, we need to label as per our criteria and classification what we have defined for the data. Next is handling the sensitive data. We need very secure transportation of the data through the entire life cycle. Like we need to have the SFTP, we need to transfer encryption, TLS certificate. We need to have strong sensitive data, proper encryption we require. Destroying, whenever we destroy the sensitive data, there has to be, we need to timely destroy the data, because as per to the life cycle, it is very important. Next is there are three controls we can say, that is pseudonymization, that refers when it remove the original identity, or it helps to it refers to the process using pseudonyms to represent the other data. Tokenization is use of token, then typically a random string of character to replace the other data. It often used with the credit card transaction. Anonymization is the process when we are removing all the relevant data, so it is impossible to identify the original subject to person. Data masking is like when we are masking the data, is like we need to mask the data, so the entire information cannot be disclosed. It prevents the unauthorized access, unauthorized exposure. So it proves the confidentiality and integrity sometimes. Next is logging, access control, and proper disposal. Inventory control, we should have the tools, or we are manually maintaining our assets. There has to be accountabilities, use of data, etc. So next is access control. Yes, there has to be control matrix. Roles and duties has to be defined. There will be segregation of duties. Privilege access management has to be there. Proper disposal, there are four types of control, that is overwriting, decoding, physical destruction, shredding, etc. So data remnants is that when you put the control to remove or destroy the data, but some kinds of data still is there, so they again may create an issue with that. So there are 6 or 7 controls what we can use, that is sanitization, a series of process that removes the data completely, decausing the erase from the magnetic tape, etc., to ensure not recoverable. Erasing means deletion of the file in the media. Overwriting means writing over the file, that is shredding. Zero fills, overwrite all the data on drive with zones. Destruction is physical destruction of your entire media. Encryption and make data unreadable without the specific keys. Next is data retention and CRE principle. We need to identify that our data has to be retained on the timely basis. It has to be stored securely and appropriately, having regard to the sensitivity, confidentiality of the other data. Appropriate measures are put in the place to prevent unauthorized access, prevent of the data to the accidental loss. Data is disposed of appropriately and securely to ensure data does not fall into the hands of the unauthorized person. So storage, yes, we should have records and we need to store. We should have primary and secondary backup as well. Retention, like Data Protection Act, yes, personal data has to be for any purpose. We should not keep for the longer period uh, than the necessary for the purpose. We need to destroy and dispose the data on the timely basis when it is no longer required. So there is duration of the retention, that is business document has to be for the 7 years, invoices for the 5 years, accountable and payable receivable has to be for the 7 years, HR hired 7 years, HR unhired, that is 3 years, tax records for the 4 years, and legal correspondence for permanently, because that is very important document for our organization. Next is data security control while data is in use, that is scoping and trailering. Data at rest is encryption, and data is motion while secure protocol like HTTPS or TLS certificate. Yes, there are some controls while we understand the data states. Best way to achieve CIA while data is in use, that is authentication, separation of duties, SEL, and storage solution. Best way to achieve the data while data is in transit, that is encryption, authentication, and authorization. Monitoring activity like SOC, DLPs. Implementing server farms like dual backbones. Data in transit is like FTP, wireless network, and TLS. Best way to achieve while data is on the screen is the description, code protection, documented trading policies, secure development process. For example, like data in memory, data in storage buffer, shoulders referring, information being printed, information copied to USBs. So next is types of the DLP. That is, there are 4 types of DLP. Storage DLP, that are file servers and database and exchange and NAS filters. Network DLP, that email, web, FTP, IM, and IPv6. Endpoint DLP are the virtual desktops, removable storage, web apps, and desktop emails. Cloud DLP is cloud apps, O365, Exchange, and Gmail. Next is principle of the data protection, that is based on the GDPR. GDPR is being used in some of the European countries, and the principle says, first principle is lawfulness and fairness and transparency, which says personal data shall be processed lawfully, fairly, and transparent manner in relation to data subject. Purpose limitation is like the data should be collected regarding the purpose only. That should not be the out of the scope. Data minimization means like personal data should be adequately relevant, and we should collect the data in the necessary relationship with the purpose for which they are being processed. Data should be accurate, and it is necessary to keep up to date. Storage limitation, like personal data shall be kept in firm with the permits of identification of the data subject or no longer than is necessary for the purpose for which the personal data are being processed. Integrity and confidentiality, yes, we need to maintain the integrity and the confidentiality of the personal data which are being stored, and the data has to be accountable to someone which is it's belong. So there are some definition for security policies, standard, and guidelines. Regulatory is required by the law and industrial standards. Advisory is not compulsory but advisable. Informative as guidelines to the others. Information policy is like define best practices for information handling and uses. Security policies like technical details of policy, that is system security policy, list of hardware and software and the use and steps of using policies. Standard is define the user's level. Guideline as non-compulsory standards. Procedure are steps for carrying out trials and policies. Baseline is minimal security of minimal level of security. So there are some standards which we use for the control, that is NIST SP 800 series, NIST SP series and FIPS. There are multiple types of standard which we need to keep in our mind where we are putting the compliance and we are putting the controls into our organization. So here I'm just finishing with my slides. So I hope you guys having the superficial idea of domain 2. It is like if you have any kind of question, just let me know. I will there to assist you. And let me know if you require anything from my end. Thank you so much, guys.